Join us for tonight's edition of Straight Talk. And now your host, Art Levine.
Good evening and welcome to Straight Talk. We have a great show for you tonight. Our first guest, want to miss, Juliet Huck, will talk about visually persuasive storytelling. We'll be back after these messages. To welcome now Juliet Huck, who is the founder of the Huck Group, an organization that specializes in visually persuasive storytelling. Juliet, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Juliet grew up on a farm, I just learned, in Ohio, and went to graphic design training at college and wound up doing litigation support for major clients like the United States government, the state of California. Juliet, tell us a little bit about the Enron case where you played a useful role in helping the government successfully prosecute Enron.
Well, we were retained through the Department of Justice, and what our expertise was coming in was to help them take a very complicated scenario and how we were going to simplify it to a set of specific jurors so that they could understand accounting issues and relationship issues, how Wall Street worked. And so we were brought in to try to start crafting that story with the Department of Justice. And
here are two of the charts that you used. I'm told that this first one was used in the government. It's the government of the United States, folks, not some piddling thing. The opening statement of the government of the United States, they used your chart here, which you can see on the screen. And tell us very briefly what this shows.
Well, this was a graphic that I wanted to try to develop that put the whole story into one piece.
Yes.
And basically what this tells us is that they took money that was being lost out of one area, moving it into an area that was making money to offset those losses, and that they didn't tell investors, and that was illegal.
And that was illegal. And then another graphic that you prepared, this one was used in the closing statement of the United States government, which successfully prosecuted Enron for conspiracy and fraud.
Well, that's correct. So this piece we worked on because not a lot of people really understand the true definition and the law of conspiracy. What we needed to do was put the fact that they didn't necessarily always work together on decisions, but they knew the same information. That's why the red bar connects them, even though they're a little bit different time frames, but they were connected by the same amount of information. That, again, was the definition of conspiracy.
Fascinating. So you're using Madison Avenue techniques, graphic techniques. You even use storyboards. Now, I know from growing up in an advertising family that storyboards are used when you're constructing a video commercial or even a print ad.
Right.
And there are panels that kind of create a story, and you use storyboards in. Tell us about this.
Yeah, basically the storyboard is the first level of starting to see their case come to life. So what's happening here is that we start to take the evidence and start sketching it into concepts on how we would explain that evidence to the jury. And then from the storyboards, we start seeing the case, really come to life, and then we'll take those and we'll pick pieces out of it to actually go and produce for the case, for the trial. Absolutely
fascinating. You also represented the Eagle County Prosecutor's Office in their prosecution of Kobe Bryant.
That's correct.
Tell us about that one.
That was fascinating. There was such a media storm. We basically worked with the lead prosecutor on crafting the opening statement on that as well, what kind of story was going to be told. Obviously, that case ended up going away at the last minute, but it was a fascinating case, and there was a lot behind the scenes that went on. It was exciting.
And I understand you have a pretty good track record, batting average.
Yeah,
Tell us about
our batting average is probably around, I think we're like in the 75 percentile. We don't always get to pick our cases. I believe there's a right to a fair story, so not all cases people believe that, they always have an opinion what we should work on, but we're a business, and I do think you have just like a right to a fair trial, you have a right to a fair story.
And just for the record, your firm represented Philip Morris.
Yeah, well, actually, my firm, I actually worked for a firm at the time, but years and years ago that we worked for Philip Morris. So again,
they were being sued by different government entities.
Right, for the tobacco litigation. So it's not always politically correct, but everybody's got the right to a fair story.
Well, that's what the attorneys say, too. Everyone has the right to an attorney.
Right.
So the essence of what you do is visually persuasive storytelling. And that involves two concepts at least, storytelling but also visual.
Correct. Basically it's a format that I've, kind of mastered over the years on a constructed story that is in a visual format to help people make decisions that you want to help them make. So it's basically whenever you need something from somebody else, if you can put a visual story together to explain to them why it's important for them to give you their decision, that's when it's successful.
So that depression request, brother, can you spare a dime, would have been more successful if they had a story.
Brother with a dime.
Okay. And visual is also very much part of that element. Most people absorb more visually, 80% visual 80%. And only 10% oral.
That's right, because your retention levels go up. And, everybody makes fun of Ross Perot, but, no one has ever forgotten Ross Perot's his approach. And we need more of that. We need more to understand. And I start to see more of that coming out in the news stations, and I think it's going to start.
And after Hillary Clinton came down with a medical plan when her husband was president,
right.
A senator had a Rube Goldberg diagram
right.
of that, and I think that killed it right
there. That killed it, right. That was persuasion on the other side.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, we'll be back with more of this fascinating discussion after these messages. Continuing this fascinating discussion with Juliet Huck, founder of the Huck Group, specializing in visually persuasive storytelling. Now, you've recently opened a new division focusing on politics and also fundraising.
Correct.
Why?
It's a straight correlation between jurors and voters, and or someone who has to give money to a foundation. We look for a person who has to go out, present information to someone who needs a decision back. And that is a verdict, that could be a vote, that could be $1. And so we pick those two areas right now to kind of expand with the economy, looking for other areas that this applies.
So the same principles that you've honed in the courtroom, you're now going to apply to political campaigns.
Absolutely.
And also to, I guess, nonprofits who are fundraising.
Absolutely, because right now, especially with the economy and where it is, people need to be persuaded why it's a good idea to give money. And there's a lot more people that aren't giving, and foundations are hurting. And so the persuasive message has to be even stronger right now.
And storytelling is one of the important elements of your not slogan, but
our trademark.
Trademark. Tell us why storytelling is important.
Well, everybody, we're raised on stories. I mean, when you're first born, you're told stories. You're sung lullabies and you're told stories. And that's just an innate thing in us that everybody wants a good story. And if you can take your facts and make a great story, you also build your credibility.
And like the movie Star Wars is a great story. It's a
great story. It's an extremely visual story.
Yes.
There's not the element of persuasion as much, but there is an attraction to that. And we, like I said, from babies, we're raised with books with pictures that always lead us through something. They want to be led and constructed. It's got to be constructed in a way that brings you into it. And that's what's very important.
The thought occurs to me that in the wrong hands, this can be very dangerous. Like a gun is neutral.
Yes.
It can be used for good, defending our country, or your self-defense, or for bad, in a robbery or otherwise. These techniques are quite powerful, and in the wrong hands, they can be very dangerous.
Right. Well, we have very powerful ethics, and one of the things we really work hard on is working on the evidence, working on the facts, and trying to make sure that none of those things get skewed. It's always a fine line. People say you can skew something, or sway something, but basically the fact is a fact, and what we try to do is go in and put into pictures that people can just understand the facts. And
attorneys have the same obligation. You can get disbarred for going into a courtroom and lying.
That's right.
In fact, it's an automatic disbarment.
Right.
So you have to have a fidelity to the facts. But on the other hand, even though there's that saying, res ipsa loquitur, the facts speak for themselves, they really don't.
Right.
You have to interpret the facts, and different people can interpret the same facts in different ways.
Right. You walk into a courtroom, there's no reality. That reality starts to be created by each side at the very minute you step in the door.
A famous senator from New York once said, it's a great argument line, when someone disagrees with you, he said, you're entitled to your opinion, but not your facts.
Yeah.
But, okay, so this is a whole new area for you guys, fundraising and politics.
Right.
And to look to see what kind of results. But tell me, you were a farm girl in Ohio. I can't get over the fact that a farm girl milking cows in Ohio winds up sitting in the courtroom of the United States of America versus Enron. It's mind-boggling.
It's amazing. There's been moments in time between different cases I sit there and I'm amazed myself that I'm in that situation. My dad is a very, very simple, very eloquent the way he speaks, and I've got a lot of traits from how to simplify that information. And so I've learned a lot by just simple, basic, upbringing on, how to plant and what to do, and I'm pretty fortunate.
And maybe you share a principle that we have here at Straight Talk, both in our TV show and also in our publication, The Straight Talk Reporter, that less is more. Mm-hmm. Cut away unnecessary stuff. Focus on the pure message.
That's correct. And simplifying is a very tough process, especially when we have the internet and so much of the news stations today. I mean, there's a lot to have to really sift through in order to get to a very specific point, and especially get into trial. I mean, you talk about the healthcare issue right now. No one understands because it's so massive. It's not been simplified.
Someone needs your help in this healthcare debate to tell a story and to make it simple. Because I was watching some of the discussion on CNN, and they're very bright senators, and they have different points of view, but no one has their arms around this.
A cohesive story. What is
a cohesive story?
That's correct.
And maybe the president really has that obligation.
Right.
Do you think the president has yet done it?
No, I don't think so. I voted for him. I'm very excited about him, but I sure wish I could get in front of him because it's not working. It's not working.
Well, if someone on the staff is watching, we'll put the website up at the end of the segment. Call Juliet. You seem to enjoy very much what you do, even though it's, I'm sure, a very high attorneys at trial is the highest pressure litigation, and you're in there with them, so you feel a lot of pressure.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of pressure that comes down, but, I just go to my attorneys and say, I'm a juror. If it doesn't make sense to me, it's not going to make sense to them. So I used to feel, I was told when I was younger not to go to college. I was told that I wasn't going to be a good student because I had a different way of learning. I was a visual learner. And what's very interesting to me is now it's my power. It's when I come into the courtroom and I come in with them. If it doesn't make sense to me, I'm not stupid anymore. I'm actually the powerful one because it doesn't make sense to the common person.
You've turned what might be considered a liability into a huge asset.
I'm trying.
Okay, we'll be back with the remaining portions of Straight Talk after these messages. We're so glad you joined us for this fascinating show. And when you think about it, storytelling, that's how we do learn. One way is to learn by memorizing a bunch of rules, or thou shalt or shalt not. But another way to learn, and probably a more powerful way to learn, is telling stories that have messages. And you said that's how we learned as kids.
That's right. Especially through the visual. Connect that visual to it because that retention goes right up.
The visual and the storytelling makes it very powerful.
That's correct.
Well, Juliet, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll follow with interest what you do in the political side and the nonprofit fundraising, and you also ultimately want to get into kids with disabilities.
Absolutely, because I was just a poor learner, and that was only because of the format that I was learning in. And I think if there's children that have learning disabilities, it might just be that they need to be shifted over into a bit more visual format.
Well, thank you for coming down from LA to be here with us in Long Beach, and it was a pleasure meeting you.
You as well. Thanks so much.
And thank you for joining us. Please be with us next week for the next edition of Straight Talk. Good night, everyone.
Straight Talk has been brought to you by Southern California Edison, the Press Telegram, and Long Beach Magazine. And remember, Straight Talk is viewable worldwide 24/7 at straighttalktv.com.